so much. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to say a huge congratulations to Jen Allpass. She's doing a brilliant job. So local candidate for Groom. Let's hear it for Jen. It's absolutely not an easy task, as I'm sure Alyse and other people here would know how difficult it is, but we really appreciate her, we're really proud of her. I'd also like to acknowledge the very incredible Dr Sharon Boyce, who I've been fortunate to know for most of my life. I've been very lucky to work alongside Sharon and also at the USQ. Is that coming through? I'll try this one. How's that? Oh, I've got a loud voice. So Sharon has personally achieved incredible success in raising the understanding of the experience of living with disabilities through her interactive learning opportunities, her academic contributions, her roles on councils and boards, her children's books, and her contributions to accessible education. Sharon, would we have believed all those years ago when we were at school together, if someone had told us that one day Bill Shorten would be fortunate enough to be on a panel with us, would we have believed that? No. And here we are all those years later. And this being Toowoomba, I'd like to welcome, and I can see a lot of friends, colleagues, and some of the fantastic people that make up our community here in Toowoomba, which is one reason I love living here. So the NDIS, for many years, this was just a dream. And I want to talk today about a personal perspective about how we got here. Now, being a former solicitor, I'd like to say the views expressed are mine alone and do not represent my employer or any of the myriad of organisations I'm involved with. So if you do have an issue with anything I do say, please take it up with me. My first memory of being involved with the NDIS was when the wonderful Fiona Anderson came to a Toowoomba Disability Service Providers Network meeting, I think in the late 2000s. It was quite a while before it was introduced. So Fiona is a passionate advocate, and many of you may have met her during this time. She's a parent carer to her son with significant challenges. She talked about the need for an insurance scheme and outlined how it worked in other jurisdictions. She pointed out that we were very fortunate to be able to take the learnings of similar schemes in other countries and to build a world-class system that truly met the needs of individuals and fundamentally transformed the lives of carers. We could avoid the mistakes and pitfalls because they had already been identified and addressed overseas. The campaign was called Every Australian Counts. And although at the time I thought it could have been a numeracy campaign, I was sold after hearing Fiona speak. She was so passionate and she was so hopeful and optimistic about what this scheme could achieve for all of us. One of the key ideas that we had, that we talked about for many years, was that if more support could be given to participants, informal carers would be able to return to the workforce and would also have the opportunity to be in usual relationship roles. They could be mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, siblings and grandparents, rather than having that extra responsibility and fundamentally changing their role into 24/7 carer. There were discussions about more carers returning to work and paying taxes and contributing all of their various skills, knowledges and experiences in other ways to society, because we recognise how much carers have to offer. There would also be cost savings and societal benefits to the improvements in carers' physical, emotional and mental health. We talked about the extra supports enabling participants to become more independent and to engage in age and disability appropriate activities, including employment and training, and working towards independent living. This would also assist participants when the inevitable happened and their last parent passed, to already be independent with supports or living in the community with support, rather than losing everything familiar to them overnight. And I have seen that happen, and it's heartbreaking. In this region, we have an ever-increasing number of elderly parent carers, and they're often terrified about what's going to happen to their adult child with a disability when they do die. Fast forward to 2021, and I want to tell you a story from last year. So I'm very fortunate in the NDIS scheme that I've worked as a service coordinator for a large organisation in service provision. I've also been a support coordinator, and now I'm representing a plan management company, and I'm a guardian to a family member. So I guess I've had a bit of a snapshot view. It also means I've gathered quite a few stories. I can only tell you one of those today, but if you want to catch up with me afterwards, we'll make a time. So a participant goes to a plan review. The participant has significant psychosocial disability, so mental health challenges, and it impacts on all aspects of his life. This participant is like many participants with psychosocial disability. He's lost contact with any family and has no effective informal supports. He also struggles to understand the NDIS and is often confused about the complex system and also all these new people that are in his life. In many ways, the NDIS has been more stressful to this person than his life prior to the NDIS. Something I found to be a common experience with a number of participants. In the plan review, the participant happens to mention that he sometimes goes downtown with a friend of his. His friend is another person with psychosocial disability who we met when they were both in a mental health inpatient service. In reality, the friend is prone to get him into trouble, and they often fall out with each other due to their psychosocial disabilities. The outcome of the plan review, because the participant happened to mention this in passing, was that the participant's funding was cut, and the reason given was the participant, and I quote, now has informal supports. Because he has a friend who will go downtown with him. That is 100% what has happened. So it's an example of how sometimes these rules can be applied. There are many stories I could tell you like this. And I was reading just the other day of another parent carer who had to give up full-time work to return home to become carer once again to her son because his NDIS plan had been slashed. Now, these sort of outcomes could not be further away from what was originally envisaged. I now talk to many stressed parent carers and participants living in this region every day. The lack of assistance given to them is shocking. They are struggling through a complex system without any guidance at times of what to do and where to go. Most of the parents I've talked to are not given support coordination, and there's no case management in this scheme. They have to do it all themselves. This region has a huge underutilisation of plans. Huge. We have to ask ourselves, why is that? And I think one reason is it points to a systemic issue of people not receiving assistance to implement their plans or their children's plans. It is not uncommon that I am talking to parents who have had a plan for 6 to 11 months and they've been unable to get any services. They often have 1 month left of that plan. They are desperate, they are exhausted physically and mentally, they are pushed to the brink by the very system that was initially intended to transform their lives. And some of them are, I dare to say, broken. For many parents, it has changed their lives, but for the worse. For me, with my understanding of what this scheme was meant to be, this is an opportunity lost. In my personal view, the current scheme is failing, in particular, parent carers and many participants with psychosocial disabilities. I could talk to you on this topic all day. However, I'm very keen to hear from our other speakers and from people with disabilities about their experience as well, and other parents. I want to thank you for listening, but I also want to leave you on a positive note, because I know I sound like I'm a little bit negative. I would like to quote Margaret Mead and remind you that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Bronwyn. You can see that there's a wealth of knowledge there, and please, if you do get a chance, Bronwyn is very open to you having a conversation with her. Dr Sharon Boyce has devoted her lived experience, knowledge and career to promoting a true understanding of disability, diversity and complex health issues as an educator, author and disability advocate, with over 30 years experience across diverse community groups. Diagnosed with juvenile chronic arthritis as a child, Sharon has used an electric wheelchair since she was a young adult. Sharon was awarded a Doctor of Letters for Research in Dyslexia and Educational Inclusion, and currently completing a Doctor of Philosophy while serving as the Chair of the Queensland Disability Advisory Council for the Queensland Government and Board Director of Deputy Chair of Queenslanders with Disability Network.
I just run over things all the time. I should be able to hold it again, you know. Can everyone hear me there? Yeah. That's fine. And I also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet, and also people with physical disability who have come, and intellectual impairment, psychosocial disability, and the contribution that they actually have given and continue to give every day. And I don't know if I can follow Bronwyn's so ordered presentation, but I'd also like to acknowledge to Jen and Bill and everyone else in the room whose stories I think impact every day on what I actually do. And sometimes I feel a little, what angle should I take on what we're doing today? But I will be coming to the room with the hats that I wear. But it is my personal opinion today. That is what I would like you to hear as a participant in the NDIS, as a person who helped Fiona go around all those little rooms. Fiona Anderson, who Bronwyn was talking about, sitting out in Roma on a fridge while I was sitting beside her, talking about what the NDIS would do and what we could actually achieve. And we wouldn't have to retell our story again and again. We wouldn't have to capture, you know, the need to express that we needed someone to help us with a shower, to help our family, etc. And I remember, because my funding when I first started, I guess being linked under Queensland government funding, was I was entitled to have one shower on a Friday at like 11 o'clock, and it could only be half an hour. I was like, well, my showers are always a lot longer than that. I'll probably have to have, well, a schedule of getting out to the uni to actually teach. How do I work around that with a shower for 1 hour? So I went for, I guess, a person who had so little chances to have any help, and my family did everything. That's my sisters, my mum, dad, and I guess everyone around me supported me. So if we looked at informal supports, then I had lots. But it meant that they didn't have any freedom at all. So I thought, wow, this scheme is going to be amazing. It'll give them a chance to be who they are. A mum, a dad, sisters, they'll be able to, you know, look at employment in different ways that they hadn't had the opportunity to do. And so I guess I threw everything behind that process of getting a scheme that was going to be so amazing. That would give funding, that would give flexibility, that would look at who was going to be helping us and encourage real lived best life opportunities. And I remember going down to the launch of Disability Care Australia. Isn't that what it was called, Bill? Disability Care Australia? Getting the pack with the books. Thousands of people seemed to be there. It was probably only hundreds. And there were so many service providers. There were so many people from all around the world who were just saying, what's this scheme all about? How's it going to work? And I started to sort of feel a little bit scared back then. Is it just going to be about organisations? Is it going to be really about the people who are needing that care, who need to get out of bed in the morning, who need to be able to go to the toilet? And I was like, how's this going to work? So I went to every little workshop that there was in that convention centre and listened to all the detail, collected every leaflet, and I've probably still got most of them in plastic boxes, because there is no end to the amount of information we can get about the NDIS. But I feel that it becomes more and more and more and more and more complex. And I know that I'm a person who likes research, who likes reading, who loves to find out more and question and challenge why things are happening and how they are happening. But it became too much of an overload, and I couldn't keep up with it. And I thought, well, if I can't keep up with it, how can someone who hasn't even been there right from the start of that journey keep up with it? It is something that's almost out of control, I think. There's some fantastic things. I can't deny that I don't have a plan that works for me, and I'm scared when that comes to the end. And I always feel scared until I have it locked in to the next either year or 2 years now. And I think that people live almost in fear when it comes to that last month or something. Is that money going to be there? Am I actually going to be able to have someone to do that stuff? Because there is no money now. My mum and dad died in the last 2 years, and that was something that was very impacting on me emotionally. But I also knew that they felt confident that I had things in place. I had a great team of carers. I had really good friends. I had a network of people within our region that was supportive. But that fear was still there when that time to talk to your planner, to talk to somebody about what you wanted to do was rolling forward. You didn't know, what can I do? Will it work? Will I still have those opportunities? Will I still be able to travel? Not knowing that COVID would probably put a stop to that anyway. The reality of it was, there were so many layers of fear that I had to build in to that planning meeting. I also had to be a little bit careful that people didn't automatically think, okay, well, because she's chair of the Disability Council, because she's worked there, there'll be an advantage. There wasn't. I didn't even have a planner in the Toowoomba area. We went outside to someone I didn't know, so there would not be conflict of interest issues. And I thought, this is how scary it's getting, because you have to be so careful of every element of the process. And I think if you don't know the process, it becomes something that is another whole level of impact onto your disability. The stress, the not knowing who to link with, knowing that you've got a good medical team, and that really does alter the way that you approach life. Instead of looking at the excitement of how can I find opportunities in employment, how can I go out and have fun with friends, you're spending all the time thinking, oh, I better just research that, better just look at what they've got on the website today, because there's always a new thing on the NDIS website. I find that you go in and there's like, oh, that's a new component, I didn't see that before. I don't know if that happens to all of you guys, but it's always, there's something new popping up and you think, how's that going to impact on me? And I guess, again, going back to my plan, I'm happy with that, but the way that I actually approached that was everything that I do. I try to document little videos of that, sometimes how difficult it is with different things. When I need 2 carers, because often I need 2 with hoisting. especially I've been having a lot of issues with sepsis and near-death experiences, so all of those are like 15 minutes, you've got to be at the hospital. How do you do that? I'm so lucky that I've got a car and I've got a carer who's willing to drive in at any time that we ring in the middle of the night and get to the hospital to make sure that that time is, well, I guess, is achieved so that the outcome is that I'm still here today. And that's only because I've got a group of people around me who, I guess, I've done training with, they've been willing to learn, and I've also had the funding behind that to make that happen. But how many people don't have that? Don't even know where to start. And this is the emails I get every day. People who are just like, we've got this plan and we've got it on our dining room table, we want to do something with it, but we don't know where to start. Why is there not education? Why is there not communication on where to start, who to start with? Why aren't people educated in that starting point and that knowing that it's okay to ask for certain things? But as Robin said in what she was presenting, just one example, she said that guy was telling his real life. It was something that he's lived every day. And it altered and made his plan not work at all. I just think that if we can't be honest about our lives, if we have to retell every angle of those lives, if it's analysed on a legal framework, and we've got so many things that we'll be discussing today about that, why is there not a way that we can actually just be who we are, have the supports in place to actually do and achieve what we need to do, and make sure that we all can have the information to ensure that we can actually do those things and engage with those things. And that's one thing that I know for myself. I feel that things sometimes become too big. And if we drill down to what actually works for people, it's something that we need a personal experience. And I used to love it how if there was something going wrong, you could actually ring. You could ring and you could know the people. You could start with your local area. I don't believe that happens very much anymore. There's some great people and there's some really great supports. But how do people find those people? And then those people sometimes become so overloaded with what they are trying to help and so emotional about how that could work. And they see so many gaps within all the different areas that there's big problems. And I think that there is a lot of need for change in certain areas that could actually create solutions where we could actually have a scheme that is big but still workable. And I know we've got so many issues on, is the scheme sustainable? It's an insurance scheme. All of these words that are spoken, and often the media take one of those things and don't explain it correctly. So big groups of people are not knowing what we're actually, I guess, utilising in our country. We should be linking to all of the different legal areas, but also the lived personal experiences. And if we've got those sorts of things in place, I think a better outcome will happen when people actually know that that funding that they've got to spend is appropriate for their lives, that it will be enough for them for either a year or 2 years or whatever their plan says, and that they won't run out somewhere down the track, or the plan will just dry up. That's what I think a lot of people are scared of, that there'll be no money, there'll be nothing. And I know if I had no funding, there'll be no getting out of bed, there'll be no going to the toilet, there'd be no doing anything really. I don't think my life would be something that I would like at all. And I think that's what we really need to I think, share with government, with different organisations. I know that the work that we do here in Queensland, the work that I do as Chair of Disability Council with Minister Craig Crawford, is actually often empowering to sit around that table or the Zoom room and come up with solutions. The trouble is where they go. And sometimes I feel like that is the issue. We can sometimes have a talk fest and not have an achieved goal. When on the ground, people are literally falling apart. The stories that I hear, I feel like if only I could just talk to all of them, we might be able to actually have them utilising their plans, and there might be a great outcome. But how can I start that? Where do I start? And I think that's where we've got to make big changes in the way that we share information and the way that people are not scared to ask the questions. And they're also not scared of what essentially might happen when, like that family or like that guy that Bronwyn was talking about, and that happens over and over again within the early years framework, within teenage years, where there's so many different varieties of care. Every person is individual, and that's what I loved about the NDIS. And it is that way with funding. You can't go, oh, well, so-and-so gets this, so-and-so gets that. You can't assume those things, but you've got to make sure that you put everything into your plan, that you do, and I guess share everything about equipment, everything that you need, and still there's issues. And I know we're going to hear about them very soon, and please ask questions. I'll take them as far as I can in the work that I do. I sometimes feel I wear lots and lots of hats. Like, I'm a participant. I actually do my own providing. I'm a provider as well. I'm also just a person with lived experience who has those struggles and those fears and has family that is looking out, at every sort of turn, but they feel scared too. They don't know what to do, and they hear these things in the media. All I can say is, don't give up, because it is a fantastic scheme. It does change people's lives, usually for the best. I have to say, in my perspective, but also for those around the room that have got major struggles, I acknowledge there's a lot of people that their life is really, they don't know what to do. They're at the end of their rope. So please stay positive, and hopefully we'll be able to explore a few more issues. And I really value the fact that Jen has brought this up today, and that Bill has taken the effort to be here today as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. What an absolute privilege it is to have Sharon here with us today. How unfair that Sharon has put up with what life has thrown at her, but then also the mismanagement and government bureaucracy as well. My father's here today. My auntie has had to give up work to look after my cousin who has stage 6 autism. And every time the term comes up, she has to spend money and prove that he still has autism. My very good friend with cerebral palsy in a chair recently had to go to Centrelink to get paperwork to prove that he still had cerebral palsy.
Yes.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This was set up, and Bill will talk about that, for the people. And I'm not trying to be political, but it was taken over, and we're at risk of it being completely destroyed. But the people who really are at risk are all of you, and it's not good enough. Now, the next person probably doesn't need any introduction. You probably all know her very well, the most beautiful Alyse Nelligan. Alyse is a community advocate, political activist, artist and proud disabled woman. She is involved in many local organisations, including being a member of the Y Connect Advisory Board, is a brand ambassador for an Australian fashion label, Little Party Dress, and mother of 3 young children. She has also run educational inclusion and art workshops for over a decade. Please welcome Alyse.
Just have to grab my speech my phone. I'm not as organised as everyone else with a printout. I have 3 kids under 8, so. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name's Alyse and I'm a local disability advocate. I'd first like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, the Guyabal and the Jarowair people, and I acknowledge that their sovereignty was never ceded. I'm very glad to be here today. Thank you, Jen, for organising this. Oh, I can sort of see you under the lectern. I think that so many times when we talk about disabilities, we're left out of the conversation. We're not at the table. Especially for me as a disabled woman, so many decisions are made about us without us. I would like to thank the Honourable Minister Shorten for coming today to Toowoomba. It's so fantastic that he would take the time to come and actually listen to us. So I'm going to be sharing a twofold experience today. I'm an advocate but also a participant. So I've experienced both ends of the stick, as I'd like to call it. In 2018 I held a forum, an NDIS forum here in Toowoomba with Paul Wilson from Help Employment. We knew that things were bad then, in 2018. We invited ministers and senators from every political party to come and meet with us and hear directly from participants. We gave providers and participants an opportunity to talk directly with the NDIS. We actually had Rowan Matthews come, the assistant minister to the minister whose name evades me now because we've had a few, and he came and he listened. So what's happened since then? Well, I'm going to be a bit more political than the rest of the panel. Nothing. The Liberals have tried to introduce independent assessments. That's their idea to fix the scheme. So, what's happened in the 5 years? We've seen participants' budgets slashed. We've seen people die. They took away people's essential care and then they framed us as a burden to the taxpayer. To live my life fighting in the system, helping people in the system, and being disabled myself has been a lot. I've seen and heard and witnessed and sat in conversations that no one should have to have in 2021 in Australia. We cannot understand to fix this system till we acknowledge what's really broken with it. The system is a shell of what it should have been. I laughed out loud when I heard Minister Reynolds claim that the NDIS staff use compassion, too much compassion, when dealing with us. Let me tell you a little story. I went in and asked for a new wheelchair. I got told, why do you need a power chair? Can't you push yourself? Ladies and gentlemen, I know I look pretty sporting, obviously, but I prefer shopping over basketball. I need my power chair. They wouldn't allow me to have a charger, a cell phone charger on my wheelchair because we pay a support worker to do that. Isn't capacity building and building independence the cornerstone of this scheme? And not, oh, we pay someone to do that. And this is what Sharon was talking about. Has it become for us or is it for the providers? I'm used to ableism. I've been disabled since birth. I've heard some interesting things in my years. But what I didn't understand was that the system would leave me in dreadful situations. I was pregnant with my daughter and the cushion on my wheelchair broke. You know how swollen you get when you're pregnant, right? So my legs were so swollen that they were oozing blood and fluid and I was in agony. The NDIS refused to fix it because it wasn't allocated in the plan. They wouldn't replace the cushion. I remember thinking at about 25 weeks that, am I going to make it or am I going to die? Am am I going to be a statistic on the TV? Just another number to this scheme. I was very fortunate. I went on at 30 weeks to have my daughter successfully at the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital. And it was actually them who helped me. When the midwife saw my legs and how disgusting they were, they made some pretty angry calls, but they actually went down to the physio department, cut a piece of foam, made a cushion, and gave it to me. That wasn't their job. That is not their job. We can talk about this all day, but we know that the Labor state government right now is propping up NDIS. But then they're propping it up in ways that, like what happened to me, people are just filling the gaps because people have a conscience. They don't want to see somebody suffering. They just do what they need to do. Sorry, I've skipped me. The NDIS can't even get the basics right. So they can't even get the everyday stuff right. And so they're leaving people in terrible, terrible situations. I see this a lot as an advocate. Every year there's a crisis for participants. There's a budget slash, there's something missing. The numbers are wrong. You spent your entire life advocating for yourself, going through the revolving door of the AAT process. I see this. They deny the most basic stuff, oxygen. How does that help you get around the community? Well, breathing might be a good start. They deny wheelchairs, tube feeding. They deny life-sustaining care. They'll say yes to Joe and no to John for the same thing. There is no consistency. There is no parameters. There is not enough training. There is not education in the system. There's no equality. Being a participant is like having a job, a full-time job. I'm disabled. I can't have that extra stress, and neither can any of you. They have no interest in caring about what happens to us. I had a $30,000 power chair from the NDIS that died in 8 months. They told me it was my job to chase them as a consumer. I had to go to the ACCC and the NDIS Commission. In that time, I was bedridden, I had a newborn baby, my husband was pushing a 300 kilogram wheelchair around, he hurt his back permanently, and now has to have physio himself. Where was the NDIS? They talk about the money we cost. They don't care about the money. They had no interest in recouping that money. We went to the NDIS Commission. I did get a result. They were forced to fix the chair. Were they sanctioned for what they did to me and to others? You know the answer. Absolutely not. I was told we educate them. We don't sanction them. There is no justice. The narrative of us as a burden has to end. We deserve to live with dignity and self-determination and choices. It is worth every cent. We saw DSC announced recently that their study shows that $2 for every dollar spent is returned. It sells equipment, it sells jobs, it sells services. It's viable. Do not let the Liberals convince you otherwise. Do not let them take this from us. Sorry, I just need to take a breath. The NDIS is just a flaming hoop system. From the time you get in there, you have to prove you're disabled, then prove what your needs are, then prove you're disabled again, and then prove what your needs are. I got asked, we don't really understand how your disability affects you. Then, if you've got autism or a psychosocial disability, they'll ask you, have you improved? So they can slash your budget. We've spent money on you. You should have got better, right? You should have been cured by now. What are you doing? You're wasting our money. The hours that clinicians recommend never match the hours that you get, never. So then the plan runs out. And then people have to choose, like Sharon said, between eating, having a shower, going to appointments, going to the toilet. If you need 24-hour care and they only give you 6, what do? What do you choose? budgets only ever last about 10 months. Then people are just left with nothing. This is where it gets very toxic. I'm an advocate. This is when the calls come to me. I'm their last hope. They'll say, the money's run out. What do I do now? My care's stopped. I don't know what to do. And I'm sitting there going, okay, this person has X, Y, and Z needs. Like, what's going to happen to them? I'm fearful for their safety. I will agitate ministers. I will try and get reviews. I will work to the best of my ability. But you're seeing people sitting there sobbing. They have disabilities that they don't even understand the system. They don't know why this is happening to them. They feel so confused, and you just think, my goodness, like, it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. And this is where the ableism comes into play as well, because they see someone like me and go, oh, she's really capable. But I can't cut up my food. I can't go to the toilet myself. You know, I can be clever, I can be successful, which we all can be. See, it's all those ableist undertones that, you know, you're either really disabled or you're not. Instead of that, well, actually, we're all just a spectrum. Every week I get horrific calls. Someone's suicidal. It's another crisis. Someone's not got essential equipment. They're floundering. They're drowning in a system that doesn't function. They just need a new wheelchair, or they need a hoist, or they need a carer. It's basic stuff. We can make a system that responds to crisis. If you have something happen, you should be able to have it resolved in a reasonable time frame. Reasonable. A cornerstone of care. I'm going to tell you about my own little saga before I wrap up, just to kind of try and end on a lighter note. I call it Rampgate. I can see everybody laughing already. And so my clinician asked for 2 ramps. One at the front door, one at the back door. Common sense, right? In case of emergency, you can exit the building. Awesome. Great. Cool, I don't have to skydive off the front step. Excellent. The NDIS said, no. We only pay for 1 ramp. These are $300 foldable portable ramps. $300. My independence, my safety, my ability to function in the community is worth $300. So here's the choice. Do I go out the front door of my house, meet visitors, go to my car, or do I go out the back and play with my kids and socialise? What choice? They said it was fine to have one. So this is their version of independence. My husband has to go to the front door, fold up the ramp, carry it down the side of the house, through the back gate, take it to the back door, and unfold it. That's their version of independent. I don't even ask for anything anymore, because I know you won't get it. I gave up a long time ago. I need an accessible house, don't have one. Need an accessible car, don't have one. My husband has to do all of the daily care, like the shower, because the support worker can't drag me into the stall. So we'll circle back to the beginning. 5 years ago, where were we? Where are we now? We've gone from bad to worse. We've had funding cuts, deaths, demonisations of participants, inequity for women to access the scheme. We've seen more people going to aged care than the NDIS has taken out. 6 people last time I checked have been taken from aged care into NDIS homes. 6. I think we have about 3,000 going a year. Pretty easy maths. Being an advocate and being disabled myself, this scheme has extinguished my flame. I'm out of puff. I can't fight for my community. I can't fight for me anymore. I can't do this anymore. We have to fix this. My story isn't unique. I know it's replicated in this room. I know it's replicated in this town. I know it's replicated in this country. Why I came here today, why I shared this today, was for Anne-Marie and every other participant that's died, and every person in this room that's struggling, and every person in our community that's struggling. That's why I'm here. I come here today with a hope that no longer decisions will be made about us without us. Thank you for having me.
think that my beautiful friend's flame is being extinguished. Breaks my heart. And I truly hope that we can do something with this. We're going to have a 5-minute discussion about Alyse's story and the topics that she's brought up today with the panel. So I will just hand this over to Bill and the team.
Sorry about that, guys. How do I follow on from that? And I know Alyse and I have been friends for a very long time. I remember I first met Alyse when we mentored together at Harristown when you were a student. But that is absolutely the lived struggle. And those stories are absolutely correct about ramps and moving them and the ability. How can you actually do that? And if Brendan's back got worse, probably the reason why he still has to go to physio all the time, carving those fiberglass ramps that aren't that light anyway. That's not independent living. And that's what we've got to change. The perception of, okay, well if we do that, that little stopgap measures, that's not what the NDIS was about. I remember our home and my ramp and all of the back area of our house we were going to be having modified. I was lucky enough to get a house in Queensland home and then be lucky enough to be able to buy that home. And I've been able to, like, bit by bit by bit, put changes in place with that. But when I was at my home and we were even looking at modifying the back of our house, it was so difficult. It wasn't going to work. And I remember my mum saying, you can't deal with stopgap. You have to look at the big picture. And I think that's what the solution to this has to be. We have to look at what people are struggling with. We don't want lives to be worse. And because people are spending every moment of their life thinking, how could we actually get the help to make this better? We've got the ideas in our head. We know exactly how it would work best. But no, it's too difficult. $300 for a fiberglass ramp. When if you just had something that was put in place at both, even a temporary better than a fiberglass ramp, I'm sure $1,000 to actually have access to your house and safety to get out to your kids quickly. What if something happened to one of them in the backyard and you had to get out there on the ramps at the front? We look at quality and safeguards, we look at all of those different areas. And sometimes we're too, well, I know there's so much paperwork just to fill in about, as a provider perspective, about employers, about employees who have all of their injections, who have all of the things ticked off, to have all of the complaints. It's all important. But the participant at the very centre of it, who needs the most basic of things to actually make it work, I don't think that's central to this scheme anymore. I think all of the legalities are becoming what's important to the scheme. We have to turn it back to the participant and hear those stories like yours, Alyse, because there's every day with the Disability Council work, there are so many issues across the whole of the state, across the whole of Australia, that are these things. And we, instead of having media about how do we make the scheme sustainable, how do we make the funding and the care and the hours actually go to the participants who need it? Those with young kids, how do we make the families and the mums and the dads and the supporters in that family, give them a chance to actually link with their child who has a disability, already has things that are having to be thought about differently. And we all acknowledge that there's different ways that we have to work and operate. But essentially a person's life and a person's chance to have their best life should be what's central to that process. Thanks for sharing that story, Alyse.
We'll go on to Robin now. Robin is a mother of 2 boys with a background in the corporate world, which she left behind when COVID hit, to start her own business in the disability sector. Robin serves on not-for-profit boards and is passionate about all things community related. Robin?
Already crying. My son is ASD level 2, ADHD, dyslexia, has a learning disability, and has severe behavioural issues. So I gathered many reports that cost thousands of dollars from the specialist, the psychiatrist, the GP, the psychologist, the family psychologist, the speech therapist, the school reports, and sent them all to the NDIS. And waited over a year for a reply, only to be told that they were outdated. We needed new ones. It took so long for the NDIS to come for funding to come through that we were unable to access early intervention supports. My son had turned 7. The NDIS finally said that we would be able to go on a year-long plan. The world looked a little brighter. I thought we were going to be okay, only for my soul to be crushed. Did anyone read the reports? We received a mere $7,000 for my son. And I thought the time I took off work, I would have earned more than going to these appointments. One social activity program recommended for my son was an 8-week, 1-hour-a-week activity. It was $1,600. There was no way my son would be able to access the community because as a parent, I had to weigh that up and compare it to 16 speech appointments. My son misses out on access to his community and his social needs are not met. Why does the NDIS not listen to my family? It does not listen to the recommendations given by medical specialists. I'm literally crying out for help because we do not receive this help, the funding that we need. My son will be removed from the house because of safety concerns towards other members of the family. They hold the fate of our family in their hands. We are fighting for help constantly in society, the education system, family, community systems. The one area we should not be fighting for is funding for our children. We should not be seen as a community where a field level 1 ASD don't receive funding. Why is this community being targeted? Is there a level 1 Down syndrome? Why does the NDIS see autism as a lesser diagnosis? So I ask the panel today, why does the NDIS get to overrule a whole medical team and allow such shameful amounts of funding to be determined? What training do they have that outweigh medical specialists? We don't ask, we're not asking for wants, we're just asking for basic needs to be met. In the video that you will see now, well, not my son, is what my family goes through and many others in the community. Bella has the exact same diagnosis as my son. This is what we see.
because, you know, we have lots and lots of property destruction and you try and hurt yourself. Is there something that you want to achieve from getting help from hospitals or an inpatient facility?
I want my medication to be right, and I want to feel how I used to feel again.
And how was that?
Happy.
Every single day of your life is very, very hard. And it's very, very hard for your family, for us trying to do this all alone. And we are constantly trying to get you the right support, aren't we?
And everyone just tells you to give me up.
Yeah. And you don't want that, do you? No, you'd rather stay at home.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Bill to address Robin's questions and also to have it talk to us. When Bill was the Parliamentary Secretary for Disabilities for the Australian Labor Party, he was proud to begin work on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which was intended to make sure Australians with disabilities, their carers and families got the care and support they deserved. Unfortunately, that same year, the other government took over, and ever since we have seen the NDIS systematically torn apart. Bill's current portfolio is the NDIS and government services. He is passionate about fixing the NDIS, reviving it and bringing it back to its original promise. It is a plan for a vibrant, functional NDIS from the people who created it, you, by listening to you.
Thank you for the invitation to be here. I appreciate it very much. I'd like to acknowledge that long before we were here, Aboriginal people were here, and it remains the land of Aboriginal people. I acknowledge their elders, past and present. All the speakers who've spoken so far, just amazing. And if we did nothing else in this trip, we'd just get to hear these four people who've spoken. That would make the trip incredibly worthwhile, so thank you. It's great that there's so many of you here. But it does make me realise how frustrating the situation is that you need to be here. Because I do think you need to be here. And I do think we need to be talking about the NDIS. I'm very proud of the NDIS. It didn't exist when I became a junior minister. And what I realise is the challenge with disability in Australia is that it's essentially, if you're an Australian living with a disability, or caring for someone or loving someone with a disability, for a very long time, in my opinion, you've been treated as second class. I don't mind people haven't been nice, and I don't mean that you're not doing a great job. But what I realise with disability is that the problem isn't the impairment. I actually think the problem is a lack of money and a lack of power, invisibility. So I saw the idea of the vehicle of an NDIS bring some resources into the system, give you a bit of power, give you some resources. And now, of course, in 2013, Labor lost the federal election, and it was only after 2019 that I've sort of actively re-engaged much more with the grassroots of disability. But what I realise is that the current landlords of the NDIS haven't got a clue. I'm talking about the current government. Now, for some of you don't want to hear about politics, you want to know what I'll do, or X or Y will do. Can I just say you're dreaming if you think that politics has got nothing to do with the future of the NDIS. And that's not saying, I don't come from any position of moral superiority, but you're dreaming if you think that voting for the LNP Can you hear me? You're dreaming if you think that voting for the LNP is going to change anything to do with the scheme. If you are 100% happy with the scheme, then I suppose status quo is satisfactory. But after you listen to the speakers and your own experiences, which we haven't even heard, but I'm sure reflect a lot of the lessons and wisdom we've already heard, then something's got to change. I think the NDIS is an excellent idea, because I believe that when you've got some money and when you've got some power, people listen. The idea that it's now $22, $23 billion, there's 500,000 people who receive funding, that it funds 250,000 jobs, that for every dollar that's spent, it's generating over $2 in economic activity. That is a very good foothold from being invisible to visible. But my diagnosis of the problem is that the government just doesn't get it. I'm not saying that each individual member of the government is a mean person, they're not. But the government as a whole has had 8+ years to get it. And why on earth would you give them another 3 years to keep getting it the way they have? See, I think what's happened is that the agency has had 7 different ministers. In LNP world, they don't want to be the minister for the NDIS. They either get to be the minister because they've been disgraced, or they get into it to go somewhere else. So that creates a sense of absenteeism, and that's putting it as most generous. Now, I am sick and tired of hearing about the sustainability crisis. I wish that the LNP ministers would put as much time into the crisis about not getting the cushion, not getting the proper robust housing, not getting the early intervention. The only crisis that this government sees about disability is they think the people with disability are eating too much money. The only crisis they see is they think there's too many autism claims. They think that psychosocial conditions aren't really what the scheme should be looking at. They think that the housing packages are too expensive. That's the crisis they see. I see a different crisis. The whole reason we set up the scheme was because beforehand, the only way you could get adequate funding of disabilities if you were in crisis. When you're in crisis, that is not a good way to allocate resources. And if the only way you could get respite and you could get housing historically was to be in crisis, well, that's just, that is just the wrong path. This was about providing individual packages of care and support to give people choice and control. I know what the scheme was about because they helped set it up. Linda Reynolds attached a little handwritten note to me at the end of a letter, one of the many I've bombarded with about particular matters. It said, Bill, we're doing exactly what you set the scheme up to do. And I thought, I'm not your co-convener, Linda, and don't pretend that you know me better than I know me. But why should I be surprised? Because the agency think they know your stories better than you do. It breaks my heart to hear that, you prepare the reports and that cry for help, Rob, which you said, does anyone read them? Yeah. And do they understand them? So elections are always important. But for the stories that you have, this election is important. Now you want to know what we're going to do? I don't need to say that we're going to spend X billion dollars. That's not what you really want to hear. What you want to know is that there's not a war against the funding scheme. See, I think the government think this scheme is too generous. Strip away all the rhetoric. It's funny, for the party of the so-called rights of the individual, they struggle with the idea of a safety net being individualised. What's happened is this agency, because it's at the landlord management, has now become, I know to use a bit, I don't know how many of you have seen the Terminator series of films with Schwarzenegger. And the theory of this was a science fiction show, but the theory was that mankind or humanity created a weapons system to keep them safe called Skynet. The problem is Skynet decided that it would keep Skynet safe and humanity was really a second order issue. This agency exists to keep the agency safe. Whether or not the participants are doing okay, well, that's a happy coincidence. So what I see is an agency ill-equipped to make the decisions, and it's in complete defensive mode, and I don't bag the individual people who work there. It's an agency which now, I think, has given up trying to run the scheme, and instead is just trying to defend each decision it makes. The fact that they're spending, it was in the Australian today, $28 million in 6 months on legal fees against participants. I mean, the previous 12 months was 22 million. So now it's $28 million in 6 months. I don't think they're even running the agency anymore. They just get the lawyers. They're making decisions. They couldn't get their independent assessments model up, which was aimed at cutting the scheme back. And so what they've decided instead to do is just cut the scheme back. And then if you've got the willpower to survive the stress of the legal action, then they'll probably settle at the door of the court. This is not a scheme that's run anymore in the interests of participants. Now the government has just appointed a new chairman of the board this week, or last week, former Liberal Premier out of Victoria. Perfectly nice person as a person, but I am angry that the government is booby-trapping the scheme with its appointees because they think they might lose the next election, because they wouldn't have rushed the appointment if they thought they were going to win. So they're booby-trapping him. So I just think, yet again, the scheme has become a political football, and all that the current government can see is it costs too much. You know, they're penny wise and pound foolish, but I'm not even sure they're penny wise actually. They shouldn't be spending more money fighting a claim than the claim actually costs. So I won't repeat everything that Sharon and Alyse and Robin have said, and Bronwyn have said. But what we would do differently is as basic as this. We want a better future for the NDIS by restoring choice and control as the centre principles of the scheme. We're not at war with autism claims. We're not at war with supported independent living claims. We're not at war with the idea that people with psychosocial disability, some of them can have such severe impairment that they should be in the scheme. We're not at war with any of those ideas. There is too much red tape. The fact is that you can have two people with similar conditions getting radically different outcomes is absurd. Because whilst we want an individualised scheme, the reality is certain lessons are common across more than one claim. The fact that the agency won't publish decisions, denying people the ability to understand, that would also help their planners. We want to see more permanent staff in the agency and less temporary workforce, because then you can commit to the agency and build a culture in the organisation which is healthy. Fundamentally, it comes down to, there's an old saying I learned as a union rep when I explained to employers when we're doing unfair dismissals. And I said, you fire as you hire. What that meant is that the more time you spend hiring, you get the hiring right, the less likelihood you have the firing bit. And so, you know, you get the plan right, and that sets things going. There is too much mindless red tape. I think I'm appalled at the ramp story. I just find that disgusting beyond belief. It's such an obvious point. So somehow we've got to have alternative dispute resolution in the scheme. You can't necessarily get everything right in the plan. Spend the time though trying to get it right there, that's wise. And then if there is a disagreement, use alternative dispute resolution. Not everything needs to legal up and go to the AAT. Publish some of the decisions on the more common matters. None of this is new. Improving the scheme doesn't require great changes in legislation. It's not some titanic struggle between Labor and Liberal or political ideology. This is a badly run scheme by people whose heart's not in it. That's the fundamental problem with the NDIS. The consultation. I mean, look, COVID has been I think a signature experience of the fitness of the government to run the scheme. You know, sometimes they can put a dye when you get an MRI scan, and the dye shows the bits and pieces that you need to see. COVID, unwanted as it was, is dye for the fitness or adequacy of what and the health of the ski, and the dye showed a lot of cracks. How on earth we've ended up with services having to run around to try and source rapid antigen tests, the workforce having to go and get vaccinated on their own time, and whatever has had to happen has been that the government has had a very lazy presumption. I'll just take it out of the person's package if there's a cost, with no replacement, and said to the service provider, do what you've got to do, just don't expect us to help you do it. The fundamental problem with the NDIS is not the participants. It is a government, in my opinion, whose heart's not in it. So for a better future for the NDIS, at least try and find a government who's interested in the scheme. And I do think there needs to be significant changes at the highest levels of the agency. Service providers are not the enemy. Now there are some who are price gouging, but some of that's also in the wild west of the system. I'm not trying to resolve should there be registered or unregistered, but I do think there has to be a minimum commitment to safety and quality and care, whoever is providing services. I don't see carers and respite as being antagonistic to the participant. The service provider in many cases has got the longest term relationship with the person, so they shouldn't be in the upper room when decisions are being made. But fundamentally, the participant's got to have choice and control. When we dreamed up the NDIS towards the end of the last decade, I wanted to relieve the midnight anxiety of parents in their 80s wondering who was going to love and care for their adult child when they no longer could. I wanted to stop the way that resources could only be allocated when the person was in crisis. I wanted to have the idea that we could have early intervention for kids, because we know that that just works. I wanted the idea that service providers could be encouraged to innovate, that you could be a disability care worker and earn an AK wage. I wanted to have the idea that disability employment wasn't put in the too hard basket. I wanted to have the idea that school leavers get proper vocational guidance through their secondary years, not as an afterthought at the very end of their schooling. I wanted the idea that perhaps carers wouldn't collapse because they couldn't get a bit of respite. I wanted to have the idea that disability wouldn't be invisible. Now, part of this means that the NDIS cannot be the oasis in the desert. What I mean by that is that if it's the only thing going, then you will do whatever you can to get on it. But how on earth can you have a serious discussion with the states about them lifting their game on disability and education and health and other areas, where you've got a federal minister every time they sit down at a disability meeting and the state ministers know this person is just not into it. States, they're lovable scamps, but if you want to work them together, you've got to show that you are as interested in running as fast as they are and as thinking about all of the issues. Disability can be any of us at any time. It can be on the birth or the developmental delay of a precious child, and at the death of one dream and the start of a new journey. It can happen in the blink of the eye, on a country road, or it can happen through the onset, just of living. The great American poet Robert Frost used a term to describe the death of his son, but the shafts of fate. The point about a good NDIS is it's a universal scheme. Many people will never use it in their lives, but when you need it, it should be there. It's a generous idea. It speaks to the Australian view of a fair go. I want the NDIS. I want you to be able, if you ever get to travel overseas again, and goodness knows when that'll happen, but I like the idea that if you're sitting down talking to a group of people from Europe or from America or from Asia, you could say, well, in Australia, we do things a bit differently. We have our Medicare, we have our superannuation. We like to pay our workers a high minimum wage. And we have a decent safety net. And one of the best ideas in our safety net is individualized packages of support. We call it the NDIS. I know you hate politics. I know it's just, it's an unlovely competition between unlovely people too often, except in the case of Jen. But can you just, don't come here and tell me you voted for One Nation or Climate Mama or, like, you are here because it matters. The single best change that we can make is that you just educate people to make disability a voting issue. And if Labor doesn't do the job in 2025, then, you know, you exert your vote then against Labor if that's what you think. But in 2022, there's no traffic jam of people saying they want to really do the NDIS. And if the government say, give us another chance, you say, well, after 8.5 years, you know, sorry, you had your chance. We love the NDIS, I mean it, I'm very passionately committed to it, but I'm more passionately committed to listening to the people we heard from. See, I don't have to be the expert on the NDIS, I've just got to be smart enough to get the experts setting the direction. And there are more experts here than there are at the top level of the agency. So thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you, Bill. Look, I think if it's okay, let's just have a couple of minutes break, grab a cup of tea and a bickie. It's been pretty full on, okay? Please help the people around you who cannot get to the tea and coffee and bickies. And we'll come back with the questions shortly. Let's just have a little break.